Hello, everyone, and welcome to Customer Value and Beyond. I'm Stephen Lewandowski, the co-founder and co-CEO of Addressable Value, and I'm honored to have you with us tonight. Tonight, we have a very special episode as we have a guest from Microsoft with us, with whom we will discuss the intricacies of AI and customer value management and bring you experiences from SaaS, from B2B SaaS, and also from the sales perspective, which we rarely had on this show so far. I'd love to introduce you to Alkim Mete. Alkim is a client director at Microsoft who's empowering organizations to navigate the complexities of cloud native and AI generative solutions to stay competitive in a rapidly changing world. Why don't you jump in, Alkim, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what keeps you busy these days? Welcome, Alkim. Great to see you again.
Well, thank you, Stephen, for having me on the show. It's great to see you again and be part of the Addressable Value community. Thank you for having me. I'm Alkim, so I'm one of our client enterprise directors, as Stephen mentioned, at Microsoft. I've been in tech, customer success, product for over 10 years now across various groups. As Stephen knows, I love a good pivot, so it gives you a great perspective on things. But really, my focus is on making sure that we have the right customer outcomes and the right technology that we're leveraging to deliver. And that's basically me and what I do.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, so that everybody knows who you are and what kind of great experiences you bring to the table and they can benefit from. So expect some great insights tonight or today. Alkim, we met in London, right, during a great customer success event, and we talked for a while about customer value and how to basically engage prospects in the sales process and how to realize that in the post-sales process. And what I really appreciated was your understanding of the topic, right, the importance to deliver that, and we will get much deeper into this topic, of course, over the next 30 to 40 minutes. But aside of SaaS and B2B and sales, Microsoft, addressable value, if your LinkedIn profile had a fun fact session, right, or something which is not focused on these areas, what is something the audience might be interested to learn about you?
I love this question, and I loved meeting at the conference, by the way. I still remember it was sunny in London, which never happens. I was eating a croissant out of desperation because there was no food. But I guess, what would they be surprised? I think the main thing, obviously, from my LinkedIn, it's very obvious what I do. But something that might be surprising would be that I'm quite musical in terms of my interests outside of work. So I've been playing classical piano for over 15 years now. And I think I told you this, Stephen, when we met, but I gave a concert at the Royal Albert Hall in London with the Spring Orchestra. So that is something I'm super passionate about. I compose my own music, of course, just as a hobby. And I find that it does help me think when it comes to customer stuff as well a little bit. I think you might ask me about that. But I think maybe that's something that might be a fun fact.
Lovely. And what I really appreciate and what I really love about this, that you seem to have found a passion in that, because what people don't know about me probably is that I played saxophone for like 10, 12 years. Yeah. And funny thing is, for me, the spark sadly never really ignited, right? So I did it and I liked it for a while, but sadly it didn't turn out to be like a life's passion. So I'm happy for you that it happened to be that way. So I'll probably will never play these large concerts, but maybe in another life.
maybe next year I can bring you on board. Maybe we'll do it in Berlin and do it.
Yeah, maybe I have to learn piano, maybe. Perfect. Alkim, since you help teams manage quite massive, complex cloud domains, right? So, of course, I think everybody is aware, right? Since you're doing that for Microsoft, the projects and customer you talk about typically are complex and more on the larger side. What's maybe a skill, and I don't know if that will also touch the piano topic, what is a skill maybe from your past, right, that helps you, especially in that environment where it's usually high stakes and high also values you talk about with your customers? What helps you navigate that space?
Very good question. I think maybe, there's two things, actually. I think maybe the first thing is on the music kind of piano side, I think when I look at the whole process of classical music, composing something, it really relates to how we think about architecture and cloud frameworks and even customer value, right? In terms of the outcome that you want to get to. It's very logic driven. It's around understanding a problem and resolving it. So I think that musical brain that I have really helps in terms of not just interacting with customers, but making sure that we're getting them to the right solution with that logic and intuition in place. I think the other thing I was thinking about as you asked me this question was when I was much, much younger, I used to be a swimming athlete. So I was in the swimming team. We would kind of do little competitions and things like that. And I think from a young age, that really helped develop an athlete mindset. And I love watching documentaries on this as well in terms of understanding how does an athlete think. So to go back to your question in terms of high stakes customer conversations, or you didn't get the funding that you wanted, or something broke as you were developing the product, I try to go back to the core principles of, discipline, focus, and really meditating into that moment to help understand what you're trying to achieve. So I think those kind of hobbies really help shape what hopefully we're trying to deliver for our customers.
Yeah, and I can imagine, because it makes perfect sense, right? Because I can imagine that also having that understanding for like being passionate about topics and also being very aware how important goal setting is. I can imagine that helps a lot. And I think I saw that also when I met you, right? The way you asked questions and try to understand also what we're doing. I'm usually not used to getting like such focused questions, right? To really understand what we're doing, right? So I think that was really good questions asking. So yeah, I think I saw that. So yeah,
thank you.
I can confirm.
I think it's just curiosity as well, right? When you were, running me through what you're doing with addressable value, how it's going to change things for the industry, it's really sparking that curiosity and understanding what you're trying to achieve too. And I think it goes back into that empathy approach. And when we ask questions, we listen, at Microsoft, we always say listen and consult. That really is the core pillar into, I think, helping understand what we're trying to accomplish, whether you're customer facing or you're setting up a new business venture or you're in a different team. So I think it's important.
Absolutely. As you sit at the intersection of like deep infrastructure and business innovation, right? I guess you would have in your conversations with prospects and customers, probably a lot of conversations where you basically have to like tackle the spread between what's important for developers, somebody that's working with Kubernetes, for example, right? And somebody that's responsible for cloud spend for a large organization, right? So probably for more like we tend to use CFO, right? But somebody responsible for that budget, right? So in your experience, is that a similar language you can use for these different stakeholders? Is it two completely different languages? Because I would imagine that the, let's call it, currency of success for both can be quite different. What's your experience on that?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on the customer that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with kind of a startup-y or maybe what we call an ISV, which is the CFO is also the CEO and they're also kind of the developer, and you have a really small team in terms of who you're interacting with. I think in those scenarios, you tend to have one measurable success value, which from their perspective, if they're just starting out, is this going to be worth me investing in from a risk cost perspective, from a trade-off perspective, which can be good and bad, because then your proposition needs to be even stronger, right? Because you're trying to tick multiple boxes, but with one person. I think when it comes to larger enterprises, and you'll know this from your kind of executive days at SAP, I think it really changes and it can create those additional friction layers on how we understand customer value and success. A developer, for example, just from what you've shared, will look at scalability, resilience, elegant architecture, right? Whereas if we're talking about a CFO or someone maybe more C-suite in terms of the decision-making process, they're going to look at what is the return on investment, what is the cost, what is the risk. And neither is wrong necessarily, but I feel that you need to, again, going back to that curiosity mindset, you need to showcase empathy and understanding of the language and really help connect those two from a value perspective. And I think a bit of the problem, like we discussed at the conference, is most large-scale organizations don't really build that translation layer. So you end up having the CSAs or kind of the sellers building that. But I think at the end of the day, you need to be able to kind of speak both of those languages. Would you agree?
Absolutely, because I think that's usually also a skill that no matter where in go-to-market, I think you work, right? I think you need to develop that skill, because something that's often underestimated, and it's also something why we actually found this company and this approach is, and originally, by the way, a consulting approach, right, which turned into a software company, is that this management of stakeholders is often underestimated, right? Because imagine you're the best value selling expert, right? And you prepare the case and you talk to the different stakeholders during the sales cycle and just do the best job, right? The business side understands what they're doing. They have their strategic goals. They translate that into the business case. You sell that to the budget holder. Everybody's happy. Everybody's good, right? Everybody thinks we're walking in the same direction.
I wish it was that easy, Steven.
I wish so too. But then in practice, what happens is many companies then acquire the software, right? And then it's getting very operational, right? Very transactional. It's about the integration. It's about getting the software done. It's getting the onboarding teams in place, getting the teams trained. And we usually lose touch to that initial case that actually brought us there, right? And I think this awareness, that's why I can confirm that quite heavily, is that the best then also in the post-sales period can still navigate these different stakeholders, not falling to the trap and working with the very operational people just working the software, but still regularly making sure that the strategic or the decision makers on your customer side still understand what's happening. And I think something I saw happen and actually working not well is this once a year, maybe twice a year, trying to get the executive sponsor to join some kind of business review, and just out of nowhere, there comes this email. Yes, let's do a QBR, EBR, whatever, and let's talk about that, right? And then sometimes you don't even have the right data for that, and then you're confused why they don't like that. And I think that's a big issue, right? Not kind of sticking to these stakeholders continuously, translating for them. And that's why, long answer, I think you're absolutely right.
Thank you. I mean, it's so true what you've said. And I think in another one of these episodes, you discussed a whole, post-sale aspect in terms of that's actually the time you triple the relationship in terms of the return on investment that you can show, not 1 year after when you're having that business stakeholder meeting. And again, when it comes to that interconnectedness and the whole kind of ideology between, is it customer success, is it sales? It's actually both of them interconnected. And I think the organizations we saw, the customers we spoke to together at the conference in terms of who is really doing it in the right way have really bridged that interconnectedness.
Absolutely. And what I just noticed is, right, so we jumped right into the topic, and we also mentioned like cloud native, right, and what you're doing. And sometimes talking to customers, it sometimes helps to simplify the language, right, and explain in very simple terms what this actually is. So could you maybe try, as context to what you're doing, explain cloud native maybe in like the easiest words you can find so everybody understands what we actually mean by that?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I love this because I know you were kind of saying, hey, how do you actually explain technical concepts like it's to a 5-year-old? I think when we have concepts like cloud native or value engineering, it really helps break it down from a tangible perspective. And I have a young niece, so if I were to explain it to her in terms of what is cloud native to her, I would say it's kind of like giving a company, whether they're a small company or enterprise or a large scale, a really organized Lego box. Everything is easy to find, clear instructions, and nothing get lost. And you can play faster and build the Lego that you're striving towards without making a mess. So instead of wasting time looking for things, so from a metrics perspective, this could be NRR. It could be, do you have the right adoption in place? You can actually build and create much quicker. So I always try to take that complicated concept into something really simple that a 5-year-old is using, or if it's the CFO that I'm speaking to from an executive perspective, a financial analogy, and really apply it to that. Do you think she would understand that analogy? What do you think?
I think so. And I can see that you already have exercise in doing that, because I think, especially in our field, if you have to explain to your relatives and nieces and sons what you're doing for work, I think at some point you kind of learn how to simplify these things. And I think you did a great job. And I think she would understand now, and she might grab you by the hand and take you to the next Lego store to exercise that. But I think she would get it.
No, it's so true, because I mean, again, in terms of addressable value as well, I'm sure you have these conversations too with different stakeholders on what is it, what are we delivering, what does that look like? And to me, if we're not having a value conversation, you're basically just selling stuff, which is not helpful for our customers. It's not helpful for Tech for Good, what we're trying to achieve. So I love that question, Stephen. Thank you.
And I think it's just so helpful, right? Because it gets us also to the next topic of where also some of this might get lost in the process, right? Because especially in your ecosystem, right, which is complex, a lot of stakeholders involved, it's something we also see when we talk to different kind of size of customers, that sometimes you have very small go-to-market teams, right, which basically just talk to each other in the same room, right? Then you have larger go-to-market organizations where you might have the first process gaps, and then you have even larger organizations where you have very sophisticated go-to-market teams. You might have a value engineering team in the sales side, solution engineering teams, right? Very complex. And which is all great and usually works well for parts of it. But are there parts where you also see, especially in larger organizations like yours, right, where there still might be a disconnect, where the measurable value that you want to generate might be lost in handovers or disconnects? Is there like a big risk or a big disconnect you saw in practice about this disconnect?
That's a really good question. I think, again, it comes with being part of a large organization, and the whole ideology of value is the interconnectedness. I think for me, I have worked across product, I've worked across sales, customer success. Right now I'm in sales. I think, again, that gives you the empathy in terms of understanding what is each of these core functionalities are trying to achieve, and how can I help them as I deliver my work. Something that I think about frequently, and anyone who works closely with me, whether it's my peers or kind of the leadership teams, they always say that it's appreciated as I do this customer sale, or as I prepare this pitch and land this positioning, how can I leverage that to help the product team to build their capability better, whether it's Copilot, an engineering framework, a customer success methodology. How do I then help and think about what the customer success team is trying to achieve, make sure that the solution is rightly scoped, and also it's clear to the customer what they're going to get after the contract. And I know we're going to discuss that in a little bit in terms of how do you bridge that friction, right? Because it happens and it then ends up being a customer success problem. So I think you're absolutely right. There is friction, but there's also resolution and empathy in terms of understanding the fact that, yes, sales will sell the vision, product builds capability, customer success left to prove outcomes. But if you can actually empathize in terms of what are each of these different teams trying to achieve, and how can I show up as I build my own capability so that the value doesn't get lost for the customer. It's all for the customer at the end of the day. But I think it's that change in mindset of going from what am I doing versus what can we do together.
Yeah, and I think that's just so important, right? And I think coming back to the topic before, right, being able to translate these complex topics, right, and simplify them so everybody understands it, that also, I think, helps removing these silos and just making sure that everybody speaks the same language. Because in the end, we don't want to be bothered by like handoffs, handovers, and long meetings around topics. We want a process that actually just works, right? And everybody speaks the same language. I think that's the goal we in the end want to get to, right? since you with Microsoft and Azure, you're kind of also basically at the core of like this AI explosion, right? So basically
Right
at the core of the hype, right? So what is one thing you think AI does brilliantly for cloud native development today? And what is one thing where you would also maybe tell your customers, prospects, or just people from the community, which they shouldn't trust AI with yet? Are there certain areas where you think people should hold off for a while, or are there no concerns?
I mean, it's a great question. I can definitely give my perspective. I don't know if it'll make people hold off per se necessarily. But I think, look, I'm a lover of all new technology. I think when I think about Azure and kind of the modernization framework, I think AI is really good at accelerating critical stuff. So if we think about the first principles of code review, infrastructure as code, anomaly detection, kind of analyzing documentation, I think it's not questionable that it has gotten very tangible and granular in those aspects. So I love leveraging that for any type of cloud native development, even for building, my own stuff as a hobby, whether it's a mobile application or something else. I think something that I'm still not 100% on, and actually, maybe, Asha Sharma, she used to run our core AI product functionality at Microsoft, and she was kind of talking about agents and the whole concept and ideology of agents. And everyone's really excited, right? You have the PowerPoint agent, you have Frontier, you have code as source, which is all really fun stuff. I think for me, I'm not 100% when it comes to, can it actually contextually judge what we're trying to achieve unless I really provided a significant breakdown. I haven't 100% seen that yet. I think the overestimate, total revenue for agents is around 10.9 billion forecasted. So there's a lot of focus on agents, but I think we're not 100% there yet in terms of the functionality without kind of human interception, if that makes sense. And I know people love agents, so I don't want to cause a war here on addressable value show. But I think based on my own usage, it really is still very much a kind of contextual code that you deploy, you guide, you provide information to, and it does brilliant work after a couple of reiterations.
Yeah, and I think that's just so true, right? Because you, on the one side, right, you want to have a trusted system, right? A record of data that kind of serves your day-to-day, right, and is secure. But on the other hand, you don't want or can't miss like this agentic movement, right? Because it's also allows scaling in a way we never thought possible. And this is also how we're looking at it, right? So on the one side, we want to build like a customer value management platform that allows you to work with it directly, right? And empower value engineers and sellers and customer success managers, marketing, product teams to have insights into the value. But on the other side, we're very aware that we need to be open for agents, right? So that we need to open up the platform for the agents that companies are already using and need to provide agents of ourselves to give you like this agentic value engineer you might require. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. Was there something you saw this year, right, around AI, around the ecosystem, where you think that's really just a buzzword and you will think that will fade away? Or was there anything of that sort? Well, maybe last year and this year?
I think I saw, I don't know if it's a buzzword, but I saw kind of this hyper dependent AI agent analogy thing from one of the companies. I won't say who it was, but it was basically, communicating that you move from the org chart to the work chart and you essentially completely delegate to agents. And obviously the whole, frontier ideology, the customer value of it, we want it incorporated, and that's how we tend to look at it from Microsoft's perspective as well, in terms of you really work with them together. And I kind of saw this article where it basically said you're going to have companies with just agents. That sounds great. I'm not sure if it's going to work, and it very might well work in certain use cases, but not necessarily from, I think, a full enterprise application platform perspective. So I would say, again, that's the thing where I'm not 100% on in terms of how that would work from a technical perspective. What about you?
Yeah, I think I love getting a bit philosophic about topics like that, right? And I think the question will also sometimes be, do we want to live in a world where everybody from the CEO to the sales rep to the CS rep is an agent, right? So it's also, I think, a question of whether in the future we will have people that have no issue working with such a company and others that think, okay, I don't want to do that, right? Funnily enough, we had a 3-hour product workshop today, and that was one big topic we also discussed there, right? About if that will happen, because somebody in the room actually discussed a company he found where basically you sign up and you're basically a shareholder of your AI company you found, right? And then everything else is an agent. And then the Claude agent is talking to OpenClaw, and all these different LLMs are represented. So I think that, to be honest, I don't believe that will happen anytime soon, right? Because as I talked to some professors a few weeks ago in the AI space, and they also said LLM is not the solution for that, right? So LLM does a lot of things great, but thinking that an LLM will be the answer to this, how we call it, the autonomous enterprise, and how I heard it being discussed oftentimes, I don't think that's the answer for that. But LLM can do great things, and I think that's exactly about that, right? So you don't to not think AGI is the answer to your problems, but LLMs might be also a solution for big business problems we have today, and that's already great, right? So let's solve that first before we build fully autonomous enterprises.
I know, and it might be that we get proven wrong, Stephen, but I think I completely agree in terms of how we're seeing that scale and deployment and kind of getting customer feedback from our verticals as well. The whole concept is great. It's very futuristic. I think it's very overly ambitious, but I think when it comes down to, again, the first principles, you're always going to need that human in the loop element. But let's see, hey, maybe we'll be wrong and there'll be agents running this show, addressable value. And then, we'll be proving wrong, Stephen.
Possible. And I think that's already touching, right, on a topic I wanted to discuss, how a future that could look, right? And I think we already now touched that a bit. Because in the end, that's what we're going to have to look at, right? And how these enterprise will look. And I think there are spaces where this can be very, very exciting, right? Because when I think about a lot of the go-to-market organizations, or let's say SaaS companies I saw over the last decade, right? What they all share is that there are a few processes that everybody's annoyed of. So how do we improve getting customer feedback into the product team, right? So how can we fix that process? How can we document it? How can we make that great, right? There are things where customer success is continuously asked for who are reference customers, what success stories do we have, and things like that. And around those topics, I think you can do a lot of agentic support in the background where you can just get rid of the noise, right? Collect the data somewhere, and then the whole aggregation and communication is just done by agents, which can be amazing. So I think those are some areas where I would hope that we kind of fix these gaps we had previously with agents. And because there's so much room for improvements there before even thinking about having the AI sales rep, because there are other things we might have to fix.
I've heard about that as well, the AI sales rep. That would be great.
Well, there's a company right now that basically offers these avatars, right? Where you go on a page and then you have a video feed. And I tested it, right? I tried it. To be honest, so far it looks like an animation being fed by an LLM that almost gets what you want, right? So I see where it's going. So far, I'm not convinced. So let's see where we will have that in the future.
I mean, sales is, again, a function. Sorry to cut you there, but I really struggle to see how it's going to work. I could see how it would work maybe if it was kind of LLMs speaking to each other on certain functionalities. For example, you're speaking to ChatGPT, you're asking for a suggestion on which croissant should I purchase or which coat should I purchase. And it gives you that feedback loop. But in terms of actual B2B or B2C, I think it'll be really interesting to see the innovations that come out in terms of how, the Entropics and kind of the different companies are approaching it. But I do agree with you. I think I've seen the avatar thing. It's quite an interesting one.
And I think also in the end, it might also come down to what you want to believe, right? Because I'm a strong believer, and many years ago, a very senior sales leader basically taught me that, right? And said, it's always people, right? People sell to people, people service people, right? You want to work and buy from people that you trust. And I think if you're a person that might believe everything their WhatsApp, Telegram groups or whatever tell them, right? Or the internet, right? Then you might be able to believe in that as well. But if you're someone who kind of needs a little bit more context and wants trusted sources to deliver information, I think that might be more of a human element.
No, absolutely. And again, it goes back to kind of what we were discussing previously in terms of the different customer segment. You can have a user persona that is the CFO and also the developer and also the CDO, and having one kind of approach with the LLMs or the large language kind of modeling is not necessarily going to give you the outcome, and it's not going to be the best outcome for the customer as well. And I love that you mentioned kind of the sales leader. One of my kind of leaders that I worked with, Rashida Hodge, I think you know her as well. If you're watching this, Rashida, hi. She has so much better things to do. But something that she always, coached us on is as well that IQ is great, right? We have agentic IQ, factory IQ, all of these additional components coming out into the market, which is great. But after a certain level, it's really about the people layer. It's the influence. It's how do you work cross-functionally? How do you deliver value, outcome? And all of that resonates into the customer conversation. So I completely agree in terms of that, but let's see where it goes.
Absolutely. And maybe to get to maybe our final question of the day, right? To provide also a little bit of, well, we had a lot of future outlook here, but to also get into one topic where you can maybe give people something what they should look into, right? Or maybe educate them a bit. So if you had to bet on one emerging skill that will define the future of value engineering, but also in general, of course, how we sell and service to SaaS customers, do you have an idea what that would be?
Good question. I think maybe looking at it from my sales kind of customer success lens, I would say that it's really going to be around having that combination of commercial and technical fluency. I would say, make sure that you're updating your skill set, because the market is accelerating so fast, as you know, that even when we were at the conference, there's new technologies being introduced, new partners coming into the ecosystem. So it's really important that you have that understanding in terms of what are the key workloads, applications that I need to really be aware of. Obviously, huge focus on developer and huge focus on GitHub, which actually is not new. The core principles is really around developers. So I would say focusing on that is going to be quite key. The other thing, again, is kind of that combination of influence, EQ, commercial storytelling with technical fluency. I think there's something really beautiful and unique in having that ability to take a complex, cloud architecture decision and actually connect it directly to a C-suite priority without losing the language or the technical SMEs in the room. So you're not necessarily just pure tech, you're not pure business, you're kind of in the middle and you're communicating at the same time with these stakeholders. And I think that's what value engineering is essentially. It's who can do that while analyzing the ecosystem at the same time with the right technical fluency. What do you think?
Perfect. I think that's absolutely great, and I think that's something you can actually actively look into and provide value to your organization, basically today and tomorrow, right? And continuously develop it. So I think that's super great educational advice, I would call it. So love it. Alkim, we're already at the end of our time. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think next time I hope to see you back in London, or maybe you will be in Berlin at some point. So it would be lovely to see you. So where can people find you? Where can they connect with you if they want to learn even more from you?
Well, you can connect me on my LinkedIn. It's just my name and my surname. I'm sure Stephen will attach it down below. But I love to connect on anything AI, upskilling, customer success, sales. So looking forward to meeting the community. And thank you so much for having me, Stephen. It was so great to meet you in London, and I'm sure I'll book a trip to Berlin sometime and we can exchange ideas and nuances. But thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much. We will be happy to have you. And maybe we can have you as a guest speaker on one of our meetups soon. So happy to have you. See you soon, Alkim. So thank you so much. That's a wrap for today, everybody. I want to thank Alkim so much for sharing her insights, especially at the intersection of cloud innovation and customer value. I think that's just a super valuable angle for everybody, because in the end, we're all in sales, right? We're all in SaaS companies, and we're all paying into what value we sell to our customers. So thank you so much for tuning in. You can find show notes and Alkim's LinkedIn with the next post we're sharing on the show. We will share it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We will share some snippets of the show as well. And as we said, please connect with Alkim and myself to not miss the next show. And until next time, we'll see you at To Customer Value and Beyond soon. Good evening.